right, a good Monday morning to you. I'm meteorologist Brian McClure. Looking at the tropics, what I'm showing you right now is a graphic that actually I displayed last Friday. And remember, I was talking about the red circle indicated where Jerry was at that time. The yellow indicated where the dry Saharan dust was. And the green circles were where there were tropical waves, and if anything was going to develop, that's where it would, because it would be south of the dry air, south of the wind shear. And sure enough, both of those green circles are what have now developed. The one back near Africa, that is the one. Let me show you here. It is this one. That's the one that developed into Lorenzo, right about out in here. So it has moved right to there. And then this one that I was talking about last week has now moved to right here, and it has developed as Karen. Okay, now here's the good news. This one, Lorenzo, is just going to be a fish storm. It's just going to stay out here. Okay, so we don't have to worry about it. The other good news is, I'll be honest with you, Karen's not looking so great. Okay, so do I think it has a chance of being something that eventually down the road the U.S. has to watch? Absolutely. I do think that it's going to have to be something that we keep an eye on this week. I mean, after all, again, we're still kind of in the later stages of the peak of the hurricane season, so we can't just ignore things. But let me give you an example as to why I'm not stressed about this as of right now. This, you could argue, is not a tropical storm. And National Hurricane Center, they even admitted so. They're like, hey, we're going to keep it as a tropical storm. That kind of, that usually tends to heighten people's sense of, okay, I should at least watch it. But I'll be honest with you, it's not a tropical storm right now. When you look at this, the center of circulation is out in here, and things are kind of trying to rotate around. But what I want you to notice is, as we loop this, you see how it's almost kind of like an open swirl out there. What I mean by that is, look at these cloud tops right here, and you see how they're blowing off down to the southwest. That's because there's really strong wind shear in the upper levels of the atmosphere coming down like that, okay, from the northeast. All right, well, when that happens, it's just about impossible to get a tropical storm to be able to sustain what we call convection. Showers and storms, essentially. So don't be surprised if this continues to spin, but sputters and basically drifts like this over Puerto Rico. And I know all of us always worry about Puerto Rico ever since Maria passed, but I'll be honest with you, this is not the type of storm that you worry about in Puerto Rico, because it's basically just going to spread some rain over there, and that's about it. This is not a huge storm, and it's not increasing intensity, and it won't over the next 24 hours. Again, there's just too much wind shear. You can actually watch the high clouds, watch which direction they're moving. See, they're moving like this. So that tells you there's really strong wind shear. Okay, there's some other things working too. Let's look at this satellite view. Notice right in here, there's some dry air. That's what the yellow color indicates. Notice around Jerry, by the way, right up in here. Okay, so there's Jerry. There's tons of dry air and wind shear. Okay, and by the way, that's one of the reasons why Jerry is looking pitiful right now. If I zoomed in on that one, you would see that the western half is just being obliterated right now. There's strong winds shoving up against it. So Jerry's going to just fling out here to the northeast. It's gone. And the next storm, Lorenzo, it's going to do like this and follow it. So yes, we're watching this little blob that's Karen, and it's going to try and go northward and follow Jerry. So everybody keeps wondering, well then, if that's the case, why do all the maps show this very awkward, weird, moving north, and then this? Why the west? Well, it's because of things that are going to eventually be in the way of whatever's left of Karen down the road. Again, don't be surprised if actually Karen just becomes an open wave or a tropical depression over the next 24 hours, is very, very weak, and tries to drift north. Okay, so it's not really the short term that we're worried about at all. Seriously, we're not worried about Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, anything like that. They're going to get a little bit of rain, that's it. It's way, 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 way down the road. We're talking like a week that maybe Karen can get its act together. And here's what I mean. Now, I will admit this is not going to be easy to read, so I'm going to try and walk you through this and try and get an idea of what this is showing. Let me change my colors up here. Okay, so this is a wind shear graphic. All right, so remember when I just said that Jerry was located right up in here? It's actually located right about where I'm drawing that circle, okay? This is that wind shear that I was talking about, okay? So now that you know and you can kind of see where that wind shear is, you can, make the obvious assumption, oh, well, this must be wind shear. Yep. This must be wind shear. Yep. And that's exactly what is happening. So let me show you basically an outline of where that wind shear is. It comes down like this. It goes across Jerry like that. It comes back down and then from the northeast. Well, guess where Karen is? You got it. It's right in there. Okay. So what's happening is it's being shredded to pieces by that northeasterly wind shear. All right. Now that you know that, let me go forward in time and we'll step this forward and I'll give you an idea of where Karen ends up. Okay. Now this is Wednesday time frame. Karen ends up somewhere about in here. All right. At that point in time, notice there is a lot of wind shear to its west. Okay, right over here. There's a lot of wind shear to its east, to its south, but there's hardly any wind shear over it. Okay, so that's Wednesday. Let's go a little bit more forward in time, and you'll notice that on Thursday, it still looks like it's right about in here. Okay, so it really hasn't moved, but there's also not really any wind shear over it. Okay, now let's go forward in time, and it still looks like on Friday, Karen is somewhere in here. It's hard to tell, but it's somewhere in there. It's just kind of a big blob right in there. Now look at the wind shear at that time. It's roaring through Florida. There's tons of wind shear over Florida. Okay? It comes around the storm to the north, comes around it to the east, and comes around it to the south. But there really isn't any over the system at that time. Okay, so now you get a good idea of, okay, if there's no wind shear on Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday over the system, it could strengthen at that time. Yes, it could. All right, so then let's talk about what we're looking at and why it might drift back to the west. Let me change my color back to red so this gives you a better idea of where the system is now. Okay, so what we're looking at here is a pressure map in the upper levels of the atmosphere. So this would be Jerry right in here. This would be Karen right in here. This would be what we call a cold front / trough in the jet stream right there. Here's another one right in here. And this is a high pressure ridge. Okay, so essentially this is why Jerry can't go this way, because this high is saying, nope, not coming this way. So instead, it has to go that way. All right, now that you have the basis of what you're looking at, let's move this, step it forward. All right, watch Jerry get kicked out. There it goes. Right in here, as this front passes by the next couple of days, Jerry gets pulled like that. Look where Karen is at that same time. There it is. So it has drifted from the Caribbean northward, and there it is. Still looks small, still doesn't look that impressive, but there it is. Now you would think then, okay, well if that's where Karen is, why doesn't it just follow Jerry right out with this same cold front? That's a great question, and you should be asking that. It very well could. However, strong systems that are organized would do that. That's exactly what would happen. If Karen is strong at that point in time and organized, it will do that. Okay, that's the conundrum. It doesn't look like Karen is going to be strong. So this is going to be one of those weird things where, believe it or not, you actually should hope that Karen intensifies rapidly once it passes Puerto Rico, because if it does, I think it'll just scoot out to the northeast. But that's the problem. Most of our computer models right now and most of our guidance is actually saying, it doesn't look like Karen's going to strengthen. And if it doesn't strengthen, guess what happens? It gets left behind. Yep, it just sits there. So Wednesday, it's there. Thursday, it's there. Friday, it's there. And that's all because what was left of Jerry and that cold front have now gone way too far to the northeast, and look what's building in. A high pressure right to the north of what would be Karen. Okay, now if that's the case, Karen's weak, high pressure builds in, it gets left behind by Jerry. Now what you have to start thinking about then is, okay, well, what does that mean? What happens to that high pressure? Well, look what happens. The high pressure builds in really, really strong over the entire eastern U.S. and down into Florida. So that is why all of a sudden you start to see Karen slowly nudging like that. Because don't forget, you get clockwise rotation around the high pressure. You get this motion, okay? So because of that, everything is going to want to push back to the west. It's not necessarily a horrible thing. It's just the way the weather works, okay? So you go out in time and look what the guidance suggests. Well, it suggests there's your high pressure, and again, rotation around it like that. So therefore, Karen might want to move like that. But let's go back to our wind shear graphic. This is why, again, I'm saying there's too many variables to be too stressed at this point in time. So let's go all the way out to this coming Saturday, Sunday, Monday, okay? So here we are going all the way out to this next Sunday and Monday. And let's assume, okay, so now we're all the way out to September 30th. That's 1 week from now. Let's assume that Karen holds together, does exactly what we just said, and is working its way back west, probably right about in here by that point in time. What I want you to notice, let me change my color here so that you can better see it. See this strong wind shear right in there? See this? Right there and right there. Okay, this is one of the reasons why it's impossible for us to sit here as meteorologists and go, oh yeah, it's going to go west and then it could blast Florida. Well, yeah, that's 1 in 1 million things that could happen, but the other thing that could happen is Karen could strengthen, and then it could actually weaken again because there's strong wind shear here coming off the coast of Florida, and on top of that, we don't do a good job 7, 8, 9, 10 days out in being able to predict this wind shear. So it could weaken, it could fall apart. It could be that this is a little off, and it could actually be that the storm misses all that. So for now, that is why you see something that looks like this. It kind of moves to the north, and then it just kind of hangs out. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, wouldn't even doubt it if it hangs out even Saturday, and it either just sits there or it slowly tries to drift back to the west. So now you know, and you have a good little background on why the prediction is the way it is. But coming up a little bit later, this video has obviously already gotten way too long, so I'm going to cut this one off now. But coming up in a few hours, I'm going to talk about spaghetti plots, my pet peeves with them, and why it's frustrating how people that aren't 20-year experts and tropical meteorologists show those spaghetti plots, and then they freak everybody out because it shows all this guidance maybe coming right at Florida. I'm going to be talking about that coming up in a few hours and explaining why a spaghetti plot doesn't necessarily mean a massive hurricane headed for the U.S. It could just mean something as simple as a tropical wave, a tropical depression. So again, for now, I'm going to leave it at that. But I'll be back in a few hours and I'll talk about spaghetti plots and the track and try and explain that in better formation. All right, have a good Monday. I'm meteorologist Brian McClure.